Hello, I'm Tom Mortier. I'm from Belgium. Thank you for having me during this conference. First of all, I'm very sorry that I couldn't make it. Last 14 days ago, Paul invited me to come to Australia. And last week, I already had many exams. The students were having many exams. So it's a busy time for the moment, and I couldn't make it. So I'm very sorry for that. I really like Dublin a lot, and I really like Kevin a lot, who organized this symposium. Thank you for having me during this symposium. What I'm going to do is tell about my personal story. First of all, maybe I had some very good discussions also with Paul. I just want to say, Paul, thank you very much for this book. I'm reading this now, Man's Search for Meaning. I really found many good information for me. It's really an honor to have this book and that you gave me this book. What I'm going to do is, of course, tell about my own personal story. In fact, I have been interviewed already by many journalists, and I'm constantly asking myself now, why am I doing this? The reason, probably, it was I had this discussion with Paul because, my mother was killed by a famous physician here in Belgium who has become famous of practicing euthanasia. And I didn't really, or I couldn't accept how everything was going on here in Belgium. I was more or less neutral about the whole discussion about euthanasia before the death of my mother. But after the death of my mother, I really began to write about my own emotions, and I tried to explore everything about the Belgian euthanasia law. I said in Australia for example, there was a journalist, Andrew Denton, who interviewed me, and at a certain moment, he asked me the question, but if this was really your mother's wish, what is your comment on this? And I found it very difficult to answer this specific question at first, but then I told him the following. Well, what this physician, or these physicians, what they really did was creating more or less intolerable pain in my family. So, in fact, I have now I can ask a physician who is willing to kill me give me my lethal injection, and I can say to this physician, you are not allowed to say anything towards my own children, so they can't be part of this. And what do you think about that? And this journalist, he told me, you first have to discuss this with your children. Okay, I was never an activist, I told this journalist. So it's for me a very strange experience to suddenly go, for example, to Australia to be invited to talk about my personal experiences. But let me just tell about the story of my mother. Well, my mother, it is true, my mother, she went through many depressions during her whole life, and she wasn't really capable of raising me or my sister. So that's true. So I always had to agree with everything she did her whole life, and I tried to do that. I always tried to be a good son for my mother my whole life, even when I tried to develop my own personal life, trying to go to college, try to raise a family or try to start a family, be with my wife and having children. And I always tried that my mother could be, a part of the family, being a grandmother. Even when she had her boyfriend for 10 years, she had a living apart together relationship with a boyfriend. And in fact, it was, for her, it was like her typical romance relationship. She traveled all over the world, and yeah, when she was, when she said, yeah, I can come to be a grandmother for my grandchildren, I always let her do it. Like, she came to my place and be a grandmother for the children. But after the breakup of that relationship, her depression started all over again, and the psychiatrist she went to for many, many, many years said that her, yeah, treatment wasn't a success, it failed, and that she would be depressed for the rest of her life. So he said, in fact, okay, she can't be really treated anymore, so she will have depressions for the rest of her life with ups and downs. So, and at that point, he also told me that a relationship at that moment was not really possible because her depression could influence my children and it could infect my children. So I was really for a very difficult decision. We just had our third child, and in October 2011. So in January 31st of January 2012, I suddenly received an email from my mother. My sister was in, she wrote an email to me and to my sister that she was in an euthanasia procedure with a team of Wim Disselmans and she was waiting for the result. But you have to see the whole picture. Her mother, she had a beginning of Alzheimer's and she didn't want to take care of her own mother. So my sister, she was in Africa. So I had to arrange everything. So I had to go to a nursery home for my grandmother, try to arrange everything. And also, we just had had a baby at our home. And I asked the head of my education, of our education, what do I have to do with this euthanasia request of my mother? And she told me that, Disselmans would never approve this euthanasia because it was because of psychic suffering and it hadn't anything to do with physical suffering. So it was because of mental problems. So she told me, stick on your job. You just have you have a family. Try to be for your family. So yes, indeed, I didn't take any contact with my mother at that specific moment. So I tried to continue to go to my job to take care of my grandmother who was in a nursing home. And at that specific moment, it was really too hard for me to take contact with my mother, and also because I still thought it was like this, because her psychiatrist for many years told me that at that specific moment a relationship wasn't really possible. So, however, on April 19th, on April 20th of that year, in 2012, I received an email from my wife at school. I just gave a college in my school, and I opened up my email box, and my wife wrote to me that I had to phone, or that I had to take contact with the university hospital in Brussels because my mother was dead. And it was immediately complete shock. I ran to the head of our education because I was in a complete shock. And the head of our education, she helped me to phone the hospital because I wasn't really able or capable of doing this. But on the other hand, yes, I went at home. My wife also phoned me at that specific moment because there was a letter at our house in our mailbox coming from my mother. And in this letter, my mother had written that the euthanasia request was approved by Distelmans and was executed on the 19th of April. So it was, yes, a complete shock at first. So I immediately, I could pick up the keys of her house at friends who had brought her to her execution room. I now told this. I tell people this. And I went to these so-called friends, and I immediately went to the mortuary where I saw the dead body of my mother. So at the mortuary, I received some papers I had to fill in, and I had to arrange a funeral director because my mother, she gave her body to science. So I was responsible of taking care of the body, but I had to let her body transported from the mortuary to the service of experimental anatomy of the same university hospital. So, in fact, yes, my mother was killed by the famous physician who is killing on request. I wasn't a son at that specific moment, so I wasn't part of the decision process, but I had to arrange the the transport from the mortuary to the service of experimental anatomy, and I was really astonished that this was really possible. So after the death of my mother, my sister in Africa, I was really like, I had to go to the notary to arrange the legacy of my mother. However, at a certain moment, it was in September 2012, so sell her house, of course. I received, not me, my mother received a bill from the hospital, and it was some kind of bill she didn't pay for, somewhere probably on the end of January of 2012. And I was really very angry with this letter, and I wrote to the ombuds of that hospital that this was complete insanity, that you can kill a physically healthy woman, that you ask the son to let her body be transported from the mortuary to the service of experimental anatomy, and then you send a bill to the same person you have killed half a year before. And I was completely angry with this, and this was for me really some kind of turning point, and I began to write about the death of my mother. So I began to search everything, like, am I the only one here in Belgium who is feeling that this is not really okay, that this is wrong, this is completely wrong what's happening here? So I began to question the Belgian euthanasia law, and I tried to discover where this euthanasia law had been coming from. And I began to read the philosophy from Herman de Deen, for example, and I asked him to help me writing a first letter myself about the death of my mother. And I called it Towards a Controlled Suicidal Society by Means of Euthanasia. However, nobody wanted to publish my letter, so I forwarded it to, or I submitted it to scientific magazines, for example, The Lancet, the British Medical Journal, but nobody wanted to publish it. And then at a certain moment, it was, someone told me, yeah, you have to send it to Mercatornet in Australia, and the editor of Mercatornet published it. And he called it How My Mother Died. Sometimes I still see, I still read some comments, what people are writing about it, and I do see many, also negative comments, what I have been writing about, and I found that quite hard to read. I just wanted to give a very big signal to the world that what is going on is really not right. I mean, here in Belgium, it's like self-determination has become absolute, and I've never wanted, and suddenly I have become part of some kind of strange ideology which is now going on here in Belgium. So for example, Professor Cohen Almagor recently just published an article in the Journal of Medical Ethics, and what he is writing down is that nobody is really questioning this law anymore here in Belgium. So doing what I'm doing is yeah, also here in Belgium, it's being very alone. It's like everyone has accepted it. Everyone, like for example, I try to publish opinion pieces in the Flemish newspapers, but they didn't want to publish me. Only at that time, the Belgian or the Flemish medical newspaper wanted to publish my point of view. But the Flemish newspapers, they just don't want to publish my opinion pieces. But when the physician who killed my mother, when he's writing something, yeah, everyone is publishing his point of view. So also recently, he stated that in Belgium, 50 to 60 people having mental problems, psychiatric problems, are killed yearly, on a yearly basis, and he just said it in a magazine in Belgium, and nobody is questioning this anymore. So it's like everyone has accepted this. And what first started, if you see, for example, the discussion in 2002, or before the euthanasia law in 2002, it started with, for example, this physician who killed my mother saying already in the Belgian media, I have been doing this for many years, I have been killing on request for many years, so we need a law. So in fact, this law, in my point of view now, this law is not really for the patients, but it's more for physicians who are willing to kill. And it has created some weird kind of ideology which you can't question anymore. Definitely not in Belgium. So what I'm doing, or what I did by trying to question it, is not accepted. It's like for example, what they said about when I tried to question it. They started, a philosopher in Belgium, he even started a petition against me, against what I was trying to say. For example, the killer of my mother, he told in the Flemish medical newspaper that I was a liar, that I knew what was going on. So, I mean, as a relative, you have nothing to say. So what I tried to do was then, start with trying to find people who were against this euthanasia law. And I found Dr. Georges Casteur. He is a physician from Ostend, a general practitioner from Ostend. And we began to write articles together. And he helped me also with a first complaint for the Board of Physicians, but I didn't receive any answer of it anymore. So this was a first complaint, but nothing is happening. Then I made a criminal complaint with I have a lawyer here in Belgium, so I made a criminal complaint. So I received an email that it's still under investigation. So my mother died by lethal injection already 3 years ago, and in fact, nothing, it's under investigation. At a certain moment, during the legislation, the extension of the euthanasia law towards children in Belgium, you had the same discussion like in 2001 for the euthanasia law, in 2002 for the extension of children. So people, again from the University of Brussels, of course, they told in the Belgian media, we are already doing it, so we need a law, we need this extension. So even in the Belgian newspaper, it was like, euthanasia now, for children now. It was, I really thought this is complete insanity, what they are doing. But it was completely the same discussion. So during this debate, I received an email from Roger Kiska from Alliance Defending Freedom, and he asked me to make a statement and to write a proposal or make a complaint for the European Court of Human Rights. So what I can say about this is that it is also under investigation. So, in fact, since the death of my mother, I'm still saying to people, no, I'm not an activist. I'm just personally influenced. It's like Henk Reitsema. He was also, what I heard about his talk also in Australia, and I saw on Twitter, I was following everyone on Twitter, that he has been speaking about the death of his grandfather. So, I mean, when you're personally involved in this debate, I didn't ask for this. Of course, I always wanted to write articles, but I never expected that, suddenly my articles about euthanasia would have an influence like this. So the only thing I wanted to share was really the frustration about being, again, for the second time in my life, really being left alone by, in fact now really by my mother, where physicians are protecting each other, where you can't say anything, and where you see that these physicians, that they are protected even by politicians. For example, the physician who killed my mother, he was organizing a benefit for his own organization, and the Minister of Health in Belgium, Magie de Blok, who was trained by this physician who killed my mother, she is a Minister of Health, and she was speaking there during that benefit. And I'm thinking, what's happening here? What is going on? So I found this, I really have many troubles with the Belgian situation, and I just can't accept what happened to me, and I'm not the only one. So I see that I have been speaking for about 20 minutes. Kevin told me that I could use 20 minutes. I hope this was okay, and I'm always willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Tom, before we go to our next talk, is there one thing that you would like to say to us, sort of to wrap up your presentation to us? Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Can you repeat this? Because I couldn't...
Okay, is there any final words for us from you before we go to our next talk?
Well, of course, I have a very good symposium, and I think it's incredibly important what you're doing. Really see that this euthanasia laws everywhere, people everywhere in the world, what they are trying to do now, it's really some kind of illusion, where they go, what they really want. So an euthanasia law is really an illusion. It's really, people think they can take control over their lives, but that's complete illusion. So, and having euthanasia laws is really protecting the physicians and not the patients, and definitely not family members. So, and it's much more complex than just a question, black or white. So I hope you have a very good conference, and I think it's very important that people oppose these euthanasia laws.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.